engagement there.
You're listening to Head South Radio with your host, Kat Meyer, a podcast dedicated to prioritizing pleasure and removing the stigma and shame around sex. We're here to be curious and have an open conversation about sexual health and relational wellness. This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes. The information discussed is not a substitute for professional medical advice.
Hi, Kat here. On this episode of Head South Radio, I'll be chatting with Soule, who is an LGBTQ plus affirming sexuality educator and a full-spectrum doula based in Brooklyn, New York. Abby's work is centered on often marginalized conversations around gender, non-monogamy, sexuality, and pregnancy. This informs the sex-positive lens through which she views the world. I found this episode to be incredibly informative, and I hope you will too. Okay, so to get started, let's just kind of find our seat. So kind of wiggle around, locate your sit bones, and ground down well into the seat. And then from that rooted feeling, start to grow taller, find integrity in your spine, all the way through the crown of your head. And just let the shoulders draw away from your ears, releasing the sides of your neck. Just taking a moment here to take a few breaths to connect with each other, to connect with ourselves, to set an intention for the next hour, to be curious, and to share our wisdom and knowledge and our experience. And so, Abby, when you're ready, you can start to blink your eyes open. Take your time. Hi.
Hey.
Cool. So yeah, I would love, Abby, if you can just share with us who you are, what you do, and who you work with.
Yes. Hi, Kat. Thank you so much for having me on. This is really exciting to be able to talk with you today. My name's Abby, and my name's Abby Soule, and I am a sex educator and a doula based out of Brooklyn, and I work with a range of people right now, but my primary focus is, I've sort of been describing it as the before, during, and after of like birth and pregnancy. So people who are pregnant, who have just given birth, and early parenthood is really my main areas that I work in.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So yeah, can you talk a little bit about that being a full spectrum doula and what that looks like, and at what points do you meet do you call them patients? Do you call them clients? How do you refer to the people you work with?
Yeah. So I work with, for the most clients. And so a full spectrum doula is someone who works with a client at any point within the spectrum of pregnancy and birth. And so a full spectrum doula can meet someone at a point where they're pregnant and approaching giving birth. You can do labor support. You can work with someone in postpartum after they have given birth, providing support afterwards. I'm also trained in abortion doula work, and so supporting someone if they are pregnant and they no longer want to be pregnant. And you're also trained in bereavement support. So if someone loss of a baby or is expecting the loss of a pregnancy, learning how to support someone in that realm as well.
So then when you work with a couple partners, do you work with both of them at the same time? Do you mostly work with the parent that's carrying the baby and then kind of bring in the partners?
Yeah, good question. So, it depends on the person's family dynamic. So if the person does have a partner who's involved, and I think even the term partner can vary because sometimes a partner is like someone's sister who's like going to be a contributing person in this, in the life of the child whenever they're born, or it could be like a partner, husband, wife, etc. So I feel like a doula, the primary focus is to work with the person who is pregnant or who has just given birth, and especially focusing on that person, because when you think of like the birth industrial complex, a lot of the attention ends up getting focused on the baby or babies. And that is obviously a really important part of pregnancy and birth is caring for this, If you do give birth, like you're the new life that you have in your family. But that means that all this attention is shifted off of the person who has just given birth and who's had this like life-changing experience that can often have a lot of nuances. And then you're also moving into a new period of your life where you have so many questions about what you're experiencing. And so a doula is someone who, like in my doula work, I support the person who is pregnant or has just given birth. And I think a lot of that when involving partners is, of course, like hearing the needs of the partners as well, but also working with the partner on how can you support this person better, or how can you be a better partner, support person to the person who has just given birth or who is pregnant.
That's incredible, because I don't think that actually exists. My great grandmother was a doula, and I think when people understand the word doula or know of it or familiar with that, they think of it's like the person that's guiding the birth of the child. Like that's the time frame that people see. And I had never even heard of until I met you a few months ago of like, oh yeah, there's the process leading up to and like preparing for the birth, but there is a postpartum doula work that has to happen and the support of the person who has just given birth. That's pretty incredible. And I think more people need to be exposed to that information, that is available. This resource, these people like yourself are available to help support the family unit, whatever that looks like, whatever that framework is, even if it's maybe grandparents helping support a single parent or friends. How do we build a community around the person who has just experienced this? And I was on a call recently where someone expressed like whatever the birth is, whatever that is if it's in the hospital, if it's at home, if it's whatever it is and however it looked and whatever happened, it is still traumatic for the person's body, whoever is going through that process, even if it's like a smooth, easy birth, like easy peasy. I've heard lots of women express that, like, oh, my first child was easy. The second one was hard. First one was difficult. Second one was easy. Like all of these things of like how we measure that experience. But at the end of the day, there is always some form of trauma in that experience. It's heavy. It's intense. There's a lot going on. Can you speak to that and how people can prepare themselves for it and how they can create an environment for supporting that afterwards?
Yeah, I was thinking it's really interesting that you brought up that like no matter where you have the birth, your body is experiencing a trauma. And I feel like that speaks a lot to how the way that we talk about birth is inherently traumatic. And like the way that's represented in media is that it's a traumatic experience. People are screaming, it's painful. And that is the narrative that you have about what birth is going to be. And then you see people who are stressed out in postpartum, if you even get to that point, if the movie even shows people after. Yeah. And I do think that like by maybe the definition of trauma, your body is experiencing a very large shift that can involve like pain in like hypersensitive areas with like lots of nerve endings. And so therefore you can be having like this very large physical experience. But I think what a lot of like the role of a doula is too, is to teach that birth can be something that isn't inherently a traumatic experience. You can, it's a lot of power that you can reclaim. I think that sometimes trauma can come out of like not feeling like you have options or not having information about what's happening with you or, things like that. And so as a role of a doula, and a lot of work that I do working with clients is educating them about what options are and teaching them that there is a spectrum of outcomes. And even if your birth doesn't go as you wanted, if you wanted a vaginal birth and you end up with a cesarean, we've talked about what a cesarean can look like and how can we still ensure that you have a cesarean that's in alignment with something that you've thought about before, not just like, okay, I'm completely at the whim of the other people around me. So it was just interesting that you brought up the trauma, because I think that a lot of the role of a doula is to teach that birth isn't just going to be a traumatic experience. It can actually be like a life-changing experience. It's probably a nicer way to put it. And then how do you empower people in their choices approaching it? And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. It's like you're destigmatizing the framework of what we understand as childbirth and being so traumatic. I don't know if you've watched House of Dragons, but I
haven't yet.
But I have never seen so much. I feel like the entire season was like you watch multiple childbirths happen and a lot of trauma in that. It was a lot, but I feel like that's what we see in media is a lot of, like you said, like screaming and pain, and that is a part of some experience. But I love that you said educating people, giving people the power to make decisions and choices from the knowledge that you give them allows them to kind of not be so framed in trauma, and like empowering yourself then releases that trauma. So even if you experience it, you're able to release it because you have the power, and it becomes more of a life change. Like that's a different phrasing of it. It's a life-changing experience. And then how do we move about in this new reality that is my life from?
Yeah. And I even think to like a client that I had who through contractions was like singing as like some of the earlier labor stages. You don't see all these phases of labor and what that's like for people in media. Like all you see is like the really hard, probably the pushing period. And labor is actually an incredibly beautiful, like almost animalistic experience where people are really tuning into their bodies and finding ways to shift their mind into other places, to get through what can often be really painful, or find movement through that pain, or singing through it. And so I think there can be a lot of really beautiful parts of it as well.
There's like a creative expression, like you're embodied in a very different way. You're transcending certain experiences in the moment. And I've been learning a lot about that in this past year, of like our sexuality and our creative expression are very much connected and tied together. So then when you're even within birth, you're bringing life in, you're creating something. And I love that you've witnessed people singing or like moving their bodies in different ways and like becoming very primal. That, like a very, very grounded primal, like that experience is really, really incredible to witness, but also I'm assuming experience in your body, because it's life. It's
absolutely
very powerful. And so then when do you start working with the couple postpartum on reconnecting and finding their sexual selves again, their sexual beings, and like how do you approach that?
So I think in my work as a sex educator, whenever I'm doing a consultation with a client, even before booking, I like to talk about my approach, which is a very sex positive approach. So sometimes that can just be boiled down to like, nothing's really off the table. I'm really comfortable with talking about a wide range of conversations. And those conversations about like sexuality in pregnancy, and also benefits to some parts of sexuality and intimacy, and how it can like help progress labor even. So I think that that's already on the table in client conversations in the beginning. In postpartum, it's sort of like an additional offering. So I say, I'm not going to push anyone into these conversations. A lot of times people are not always comfortable with that, but offering that I am open to having conversations about sexuality and intimacy if they want to. That is, I'm currently building it out into like more of an offering. And so what I'm working on is more creating like a workshop and reconnecting to sexuality in postpartum and making that into a more like individual offering. Right now it's more integrated. And I'm even thinking of, I did have a client who like in our initial consultation, I had mentioned the really like sex positive approach. And I had been working with her, and I think it was our second visit that she sort of like brought up like, oh, did you think you mentioned that you talk about like sexuality? And I was like cooking for her at the time, and I was like, oh yeah, like I'd be happy to talk about that if that's something you want to open up a discussion about. And it was really awesome, because I think she expressed that she was in like a postpartum group, but there was no place to talk about how she feels like she wasn't reconnecting to herself in the same way, or things were still in pain, or was challenging navigating conversations with her partner about the expectations around sexuality. And so I think it really emphasized that a lot of postpartum support doesn't integrate sexuality. It's a really separate thing. And so I think it's been great to integrate that into my practice. And then I'm wanting to create its own offering as well for people who are experiencing this and then not finding it in their journey into postpartum.
And I'm sure with each client, it's always very different, the process and the experience, but what does that look like? What does a session with you look like? So that could be at any point in your offering, but you said like she came to you and you were cooking for her. So what is a session with a doula?
Yeah, well, so it varies a lot. Postpartum support can look like a lot of things. It can be a lot more baby-centered or newborn care training, or it can be, I've had clients where I just did meal prep and cooking for them, and just some like general tidying around the house with conversation and checking in with them as well. also done overnight doula work where you stay in the person's house and support throughout the night. So when the baby wakes up, you wake up with the baby and bring them to the person who's feeding them, and then you put the baby back down to sleep. I think, I guess as I break it down, since they can all be like so different, or they can often involve a lot of different activities, I think a lot of it is always starts with like a check-in on how are you doing and what are the things that you're encountering since the last time that I saw you or since we first had a consultation. Parents have a lot of questions about everything that's coming up, and a doula can be an amazing resource for finding answers to those. Even if I don't have the answer, I'm a person who can go have reputable sources to find that answer, bring it back to them. So a check-in about things. And then I often like to set, if parents are comfortable, like a few goals of what do we want to accomplish today. And so that could be like, I want to learn how to properly swaddle my baby. I'm feeling really confused about the wraps that we have. And so, okay, great. So we're going to practice with the baby, or we're going to learn how to do baby wearing, and we're going to run that a few times. And then maybe help with putting down the baby, or maybe someone's having trouble with breastfeeding. So I would support on that. And then when it comes to conversations about sexuality, it might be like, oh, we're having like issues around reapproaching sexuality, or I'm still experiencing a lot of pain. Is that really normal at this point in my postpartum experience? I was told that by like 6 weeks, I'd be ready to go. So why am I feeling different? So a lot of it can be like normalizing that everyone's body heals. As you said, your body has experienced what could be called a traumatic experience or really life-changing physical experience. And everyone has different healing markers. And so I think like normalizing that, and also reimagining what sex and intimacy is. It might have looked a certain way in your prenatal life before you have a baby. And now that especially if you've given birth vaginally, that may look really different for you. And so how do we explore the full spectrum of what sexuality is and sensuality is now that you've had this sort of like shift?
Yeah. And I think it's also like not labeling it as bad. Like it's just different. Our bodies change, our experiences change, our connection, even as we age. So you don't even have to go through the birth process, but as we age, our bodies change, and what feels good to us and what doesn't. And I love that you're just rediscovering or discovering for the first time even in this experience. And it doesn't have to be bad or shameful or like there's something wrong to be fixed, right? It's not you're not broken now. And like, it's not about that. I love that you phrased it as like it's a discovery, because there's so much newness here.
Well, yeah. And you're even making me think that, your preferences, your sexuality changes so many times throughout your life. Like what that might have looked like in like early exploration, maybe teens or 20s into maybe 30s or into your older years. You're going to be experiencing all these shifts in sexuality and your preferences and like how you identify. I think birth and new parenthood is often like such an overnight switch for people. It feels like such a difference that it can be really jarring, whereas those other shifts can be often really gradual. So I think, normalizing these changes are going to be happening anyways. You're going to be having different preferences, and this is an opportunity for exploration. That can often be a much more positive way to approach these types of conversations and the feelings that parents might be having.
And then moving through this, the baby grows up and becomes a preschooler. And so some of the work that you've focused on is sexual health that includes pleasure for children, for young people. And I would love for you to speak on that, because I think that's something too that I am seeing a lot. I have a lot of nieces and nephews who are of the ages of like 5, 6, 7. And so language has changed. The language around sex has changed. And I think a lot of parents are in that place of wanting to be more sex positive and wanting to express things more openly with their children. So what is that work that you've done? And if you can give us a little bit of information around sexual health that includes pleasure for preschoolers.
Yeah. So I can think this can often feel like a hot button topic. Yeah. And so I like to give a little like context to that. Sexuality is something that spans an entire lifetime. It's not like when you're 13 and the pituitary gland kicks in, you start going through puberty. Like now I have a sexuality. It's always been a part of any individual. what I think the distinction is like how you safely explore that or speak about it in ways that are age appropriate and comprehensive for whatever age group that you're working in. So how do you scale that to each age group? And so what that looks like for young children or preschoolers is having conversations and sharing information that teach them about their body parts without shame, and that teach them that they have autonomy and choice in things. And what that can do is when you teach that to someone at a young age, is that they're then able to make more autonomous decisions that are informed by their own individual feelings or informed by their own pleasure later on in life. And so it's really like you're creating a groundwork for who will become like adolescents and then young adults and adults to make choices that are safer for themselves and also safer for other people and more informed by their own preferences and their own pleasure. And so I think, with preschoolers, a lot of that can start with, what are the names of all of your body parts? And it's not just like your head and like, here's all my fingers. You can say, this is my vulva and this is a penis and I have nipples. And it's okay to say all of those things. None of that is shameful, to be able to name the body parts that are on your body. And also teaching children about boundary setting. So it's creating a process of having a child be able to assess, what are those internal feelings that I'm having right now about a situation that I'm in? Do I like it? Do I not like it? How do I share that I like this or share that I don't like this? And then if someone shares that they don't like something, how do you then respect that they are saying that they don't like something? And that can be like asking for a hug or saying, I don't want a hug right now. And it's okay to set those boundaries, even when you're like a young child. And so I think that like it's the boundary setting and the anatomically correct body parts are really big parts of it. And then the last component is like that people at all ages can experience pleasure. And I think that children are often exploring that at a young age, and it can feel sometimes overwhelming for parents or educators who are working with them to witness that. How do you deal with a child's sexuality, especially as an adult who is associating someone exploring what might just feel like nice on their body as inherently sort of sexual or driven by a sexual desire? And there's sort of a distinction. It's like you are in a body with nerve endings that can experience a range of feelings. As you grow older, you grow to understand a world that is, a lot of things are very sexualized. You might start to experience sexual desire when you get older, but at a young age, it's not driven by those things. And so how do you a lot of the work that I do is creating that distinction and allowing people to explore that they have bodies that have certain feelings, but then also helping children set boundaries about where they explore those or when they explore those, or having some understanding of the world that they live within that is scaled to their age group, if that all makes sense.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're working both with parents or the adults who, and especially this last part that you talked about it's about the labeling of the exploration. So if your child is touching themselves in a way and is kind of curious about their bodies, it's the adult's responsibility to communicate that, not in a way of like you're over, I guess, putting a label on it that only from an adult framework, only from living a life and kind of experiencing those things would you know that that's what that is, whereas the child is just experiencing, like you said, like in body, like, oh, that massage on my scalp feels good, the same way that like maybe touching myself might feel good, and I'm just curious about these things. So it's that like introducing curiosity in a safe way and like knowing the boundaries of that for children. So you're educating both, I guess my question is, you're educating both parents and adults in children's lives as well as the children. And educating the adults on how to educate children.
Because, yes, so primarily I'm working with adults who work with children, so whether that's parents who have young children or it's preschool providers, people who work in kindergarten who are interacting, or people who are like nannies and babysitters, people who are interacting with that age group. And that is because those people are often going to be like the number one people that this child is interacting with. And so therefore they're going to be learning the most from them, not even necessarily in like, now we're going to talk about sex and bodies, but it's in everything that you do every day. So it's really like the work that I do is really teaching like a framework through which people who work with young children can interact with those kids in a sex positive way, in a way that says that body parts are the names of our body parts are just the names of our body parts. There's no shame. How do we not pass on that shame and discomfort to our children? So yeah, it's primarily working with the adults who are in the lives of the children.
Yep. It's more relational wellness. Like how can we relate? How can we create a safe channel of communication? So I think that when people hear like sexual health that includes pleasure for preschoolers, like you said, it's a hot button topic right now, especially in this country, and people get completely freaked out by that. Like, what are you teach? Like, what is happening? And it's not the same education that you would be getting during puberty in junior high school. It's not the same thing. It's more of like, as you were speaking, I was like, oh, I'm understanding this. It's relational wellness, and it's the people that are in this child's bubble and how they see and experience the world and how they're communicated with, and where their autonomy is established, where their boundaries are established starts here, so that as they grow as adults, they know how to do those things. It's a skill set, not necessarily sex as we know it as adults.
Exactly. It's not the sex ed you had in like 8th grade in middle school. It's a really, really different conversation. And it really challenges adults to reflect on their own sexuality and their own tough points where they feel shame or discomfort, and reevaluating how they want to create a life or help their child explore a life that is without that shame or with less of that shame and discomfort. So it's really like it's working on with adults on their own process with their own experiences, and then teaching how they can then impart a more shame-free, discomfort-free approach with the children that they work with too.
That's incredible work, by the way. That's amazing, because that's multi-generational empowerment.
A lot of healing.
A lot of healing. I am in awe of the work that you do, Abby. That's incredible.
Thank you. And
then just to kind of wrap it up a little bit, I would love to know, what is your favorite sex scene from a movie? So this is a totally different subject. But if there's like a scene from a movie that you're just like, yep, that's my favorite sex scene, is there one that you have?
Okay, well, honestly, the first thing that came to mind is I don't know if you saw Ammonite with Saoirse Ronan and Kate Winslet.
Okay,
the one from the Titanic.
That was on my list of films to watch, but I didn't get a chance.
Okay, well, I don't know if I want to give away.
No, please tell me. Yeah, spoiler alert. Well, but please share.
Because Saoirse Ronan fully sits on Kate Winslet's face, and I was like, I don't know if I've ever seen this fully in a movie. Like, this is amazing that they put this in this movie. I thought it was a period piece. So I was like, I just love that they threw this into this period piece. Face-sitting representation. I thought it was like hilarious and great, and I also just wondered what the experience of Saoirse Ronan must have been to like have to do this scene with Kate Winslet, who's like such an accomplished, experienced actress. I honestly just thought it was like hilarious and groundbreaking.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
And I'm now going to watch that.
Yeah.
I love period pieces, and I love both of those actresses. So it's like, that's been on my radar to watch, but
and
I did not know that part of that film.
The queer movies too are always it's the period pieces. Another lesbian period piece.
Thank you so much. Can you just tell everyone where they can find you, what you're working on, all the things to find Abby?
Yes. So you can find me on my website. It's my first name, last name.com. So abbysoule.com. And you can find that on Kat's website, I guess. And on my website there, you can find my doula services, see all of my offerings, past workshops that I've done, and upcoming workshops for parents and offerings for parents, people who are looking to engage more in exploring their own sexuality postpartum, in pregnancy, or exploring a more sex positive approach with their children or the young people who they work with. So I would say that's the number one way you can find me.
I have one more question that came up. So in this, what you're offering sounds incredible, but I feel like it probably fits into a certain demographic of means for people. So when people don't fall into that category, what resources do you have for people who might not be able to afford a doula to come into their home to support their life, their lifestyle, this new change? What resources do you recommend are there for people who can't have this in their life, this gift?
So I'm actually really glad you brought that up, because I think doula should be accessible to everyone. And especially often the times the people who might not have, like you said, the means to afford them are going to be the ones who need them the most. And so personally in my practice, and I think most other doulas who I know, have a sliding scale option. So that makes it such that I can go to a low enough amount, or I take clients at a high rate, some clients, so that I can afford to take clients at a lower rate as well. And so with any doula, whether you would want to book with me or you want to book with someone else, always ask about sliding scale rates. If the rates do not slide to a level where you're able to access them, depending on where you live, there are community doula programs that are often funded by grants or a government program. I would Google free doulas wherever city you live. There are ways to get connected to those support services. Even if you're not hiring someone individually, oftentimes through a program, a community doula program, or sometimes like a government health program can be another way that you can find a doula. So I agree. I don't ever want money to be a barrier to someone receiving truly life-saving care and support. So always ask about sliding scale, do your research on community doula programs. And then also, if you ever do end up talking to a doula, you can always also ask, do you know of other free programs, free doula services? People can often provide referrals because everyone's all connected on that side.
It seems like a network of resources. So it's there. And that's why I thought it was important to ask that, because I do feel like people will be listening and automatically be like, I can't afford that. I don't have a townhouse and all these means. And there is resources out there for everyone. And I think we just need to make sure that people know that and not to be afraid to say, do you offer a sliding scale? I think that's important for people to not make that exactly the barrier to something. Like, don't make that decision. Always ask first, because you never know where that can lead, that path can lead for you.
Yes, I know. I'm so glad you brought that up. Definitely always ask that money should not be, well, it often is a barrier. It should not be a barrier to these kinds of services. So it's okay to advocate for your own health and safety.
Amazing, Abby. Thank you so much for being on Head South Radio. It's been a pleasure. I thoroughly enjoy. I'm so glad SJ introduced us, and I'm excited to chat with you and see you again soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It was such a great discussion.
Special thanks to all of our guests. Head South is hosted by Kat Meyer, produced by Isis Barlow, edited by Megan Hook, with music by Lily Rezi Rothman, graphics by Ella Chodos Irvine, cover art by Gina Ship Casey, and intro by Murph Meyer.
If you're looking for me, I'm heading south. All year round, I'm going down. Now you know where I'll be, I'm heading south. So come on, look me right in the